Digital Foundry is proudly sponsored by the Logitech G935 headset.
The biggest surprise about this E3 showing of the Final Fantasy VII Remake? That it's matured into a gorgeous and very much playable game, with a release date set for the 3rd of March 2020. Square Enix's new trailer made a real mark this year, more so than any before it, in showing how Unreal Engine 4 transforms a PS1 classic into something palatable for the modern day. Gameplay systems are laid bare, and there's a much better idea now of how the scale of Midgar is being expanded upon. From a technical perspective, it finally looks set to deliver as one of the company's most ambitious projects. It's staggering to consider how far we've come. The pre-rendered backdrops, FMVs, and simple polygonal modelling of the 1997 original still carry a lot of charm. Arguably, there's no way this remake can recreate the impact of playing it back then either, when many of these techniques were cutting edge. Still, Capcom's work on Resident Evil 2 Remake shows you can marry an old gameplay template with a new engine to produce crowd-pleasing results. For Square Enix, the goal is simplified. They're giving the big budget treatment to just an early portion of the original game. It makes sense too. A focus only on Midgar narrows the scope. It hones the focal point, letting its team ratchet up the micro-level detail. What are we looking at then? Well, we have a high bitrate version of the trailer as offered to the press, and also a YouTube gameplay feed from the Square Enix conference. Lots to work from, and resolution-wise, each frame I've tested hits a native 1920 by 1080. It's very possible a PS4 Pro is being used to show the best case hardware of the moment, but no guarantees. What we do have is confirmation from Square Enix via a Game Informer interview that it's being developed as a cross-gen title, with whatever system Sony's cooking up for the future. Performance is an interesting point here. After all, Square Enix had lofty goals for that famous PS3 tech demo shown in 2005, which ran this whole train sequence at a full 60 frames per second. Also, given that Kingdom Hearts 3, which runs on the Unreal Engine as well, ran at an unlocked 60 on PS4 and Pro, there's precedent for a 60Hz target in this remake. Factor in the more real-time style of combat, and it makes more sense than 30fps, but we'll have to see. Now sadly, the trailer handed to us is only encoded at 24fps, while the gameplay showcase is encoded at 30fps with ghosting artifacts. It's not a reflection on how the game will run at all, but it does mean, for now, we can't see how it's achieving a target FPS, or even what that target FPS is. With that in mind, let's consider the standout details pushed by Unreal Engine. Here's a literal shot-for-shot comparison against the original game. It's a ridiculous contrast to make, but shows the distance travelled in 22 years. Square Enix's move to real-time 3D blitzes past the quality of those FMVs. From the lighting to the materials, there's a lot of change. Scenes are added, rearranged, but the point is you can still see the tempo of this intro is very much in sync. From the pullback from Eris on the streets to the overview of Midgar, the framing is surprisingly faithful. In terms of rendering a huge city, the remake targets a high bar for density of detail. The environment is filled in with more streets, billboards, scaffolds, tram lines, and terraced houses lit from the inside. Cars line the motorways circling each sector, and the Shinra mansion at its centre is flanked by spotlights casting volumetric light dotted with signature Mako green particle effects. In 1997, this shot was a declaration of intent for Squaresoft's move to 3D and CG cutscenes. It was the team's big follow-up to the sprite-based work in Final Fantasy VI, but by today's standards, it does seem barren. The remake fills in these gaps in a way that you'd hope, for a 1080p picture and beyond. A major feature of the Unreal Engine here is the physics interplay. Square Enix very much taps into it from every angle it can in this trailer, but it does involve looking close to see how far it goes. The cloth on Eris's dress sways during her opening shot, the pink ribbon and hair flowing naturally as she steps up from the fountain. In gameplay, we have boxes and debris knock around to every attack. Even the sewer enemies, funnily enough, have physics applied to their tongues as they sway from side to side, hardly a detail we'd catch in the original game. And then, finally, we have liquid simulation shown off heavily in the whiskey at Tifa's bar. Character detailing is standout too. Next to the likes of Resident Evil 2 Remake, it holds its quota. You can catch minute scratches on Cloud's Buster Sword, and even the rich cotton material of his top comes to life. Given what we had to work with in 1997, even his more lifelike battle character model didn't give a great sense of what he was actually wearing, but now it's properly realised. Tifa's reveal is also a highlight. Again, there's a blend of metal inserts and leather across her gloves that shows the minute level of detail Square Enix is aiming for. The only part perhaps which doesn't come across too well right now is the hair. In the bar scene there's a lot of dithering to each strand on Tifa's hair, but it's hardly a deal breaker. All of this close attention to quality ties in with the lighting. Easily the best showcase for this is the train chase scene, with the carriage whipping past different platforms. Every moment we see the entire framework of the train cast a line of shade across the seating, and the way flashes of light play across the Buster Sword. In combat, explosions cast brilliant light across each character too. Equally impressive is the skin. Facial detail on all characters is particularly strong, but there's a natural blended look to skin tones, in cutscenes at least, that gives it an almost CG movie-like quality. Subsurface Scattering is a feature of Unreal, a technique that works well for Mortal Kombat 11, but whether it's used here remains to be seen. Either way, it's impressively handled. It's hard to overlook the focus on particle effects throughout the trailer. Every encounter erupts in a frenzy of alpha-based detail. Barrett's Gatling gun causes sparks against metal, and ash rises from nearby fire, with the real-time nature of combat energizes the scene in a way that wasn't possible before. Now, I'd hope we do have HDR support to make the most of these effects. After all, these elements are the ones that tend to stand out most in a wider colour space. The prospects for HDR are mixed though, given Square's track record. It's still not included with the recent Kingdom Hearts 3, but on the other hand, Final Fantasy 15 gives an exemplary use of the tech. Let's hope it makes the cut. Laid over the top of all this is an impressive post-effects suite. Looking close at the trailer, there's a big difference in quality between the cutscenes and gameplay. In cutscenes, bokeh depth of field features heavily right from the start, creating a beautiful lens distortion to the background lights. Also notable is the high quality motion blur for both objects and camera velocity that blends the movement naturally. Again, it creates the effect of a big budget film animation, something the team will be familiar with after its work on Advent Children. Now, this trailer is labelled as development footage, but some scenes could partly be high quality movie encodes rather than in-engine. Not that this matters of course, but clearly gameplay post-effects are lower in quality. The depth of field effect is less of a feature for a start. As for motion blur, gameplay scenes keep only the per object form of it, on attacks, while the camera blur seems to be cut away outright. This may change by the final release, but that's how it stands right now. It's also noticeable that cutscenes rendered in-engine run with low quality full screen motion blur too. Notice how the edges have clear banding during this train sequence as opposed to the clean lines of the opening Midgar shots. A final word on reflections. Much like Kingdom Hearts 3, we're getting screen space reflections in combat. It's certainly missing the subtlety of ray trace games we've seen as of late, and that comes with the usual pros and cons. Being based on what's visible to the player within the frame, reflections are partially rendered, and sometimes obstructed by characters as they run past. It creates these odd artifacts at points, under arms, where the reflection doesn't quite resolve properly. Still, that's really par for course, and a bit of a nitpick. Certainly compared to the likes of that 2005 tech demo, we've come an awfully long way in the detailing of each scene. In the fullness of time, we'll have more to say on the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So far, it looks confidently built, and even if it's only offering a segment of the full narrative arc, the hard work seems to be paying off technically. The modelling, material work, effects and post-suite all show signs of building on the experience gained from the Kingdom Hearts 3. The wait must go on until March 2020, but it's great to see this game finally materialise as a playable title. As an aside, you can see the road not taken in the Final Fantasy VIII Remaster. Announced at that same E3 presentation, it's boasting new character models, with some touch-ups to those backdrops. Fundamentally, it's the original experience with a new skin, but it's an approach that might have worked for the classic Final Fantasy VII experience. Instead, we're going all the way to the deep end, with a full-blooded remaster that, realistically, will see follow-ups to complete the story well into the next generation. It's a long play. The first part of this remake though, at least from what we're seeing at this year's E3, is starting on the right foot in terms of ambition and scale, and I can't wait to see more. But that's all I have for you today. If you're finding our E3 coverage useful or insightful in any way, please feel free to like or even subscribe. And if you do that, Of course, feel free to hit the bell to get notifications as soon as each video lands. For the source file to this video and many more, be sure to check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.
Featuring 2.4 GHz wireless, 50mm Pro G audio drivers, and DTS Headphone X 2.0 surround sound technology under the hood, the G935 headset delivers the ultimate wireless audio solution for gamers, whether you're playing on PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, or mobile. Order yours today from Logitech G.